More than 1 week after the Australian Grand Prix, what is your evaluation of Scuderia Ferrari Marlboro performance in the first race?
We've spent the recent days analysing the performance in qualifying and the race. Obviously our race pace looked quite a lot better than the qualifying performance, and I think some of that is down to the way the car uses the tyres, so there's a lot of analysis going into trying to understand one lap performance against a long run performance in the race. And similarly we've also been looking at the aerodynamic characteristics of the car, trying to understand where we can improve it, where we think there's more potential to be had. So and we've been basically developing a test program that we'll be working through in Malaysia.
DRS KERS tyres, there were many new things in Australia. How did they perform in our car, and what is your opinion about the eventual improvement of the show?
I think, well, starting with the DRS, it's a interesting development for Formula One. I think teams are now all closing in to have a similar drag reduction level. So people's top speeds are can vary between 20 to 25 kilometres an hour. I think it has made overtaking slightly easier, particularly for when you're stuck in traffic behind back markers, but it still showed with the settings in Melbourne, which are about the longest they could do there because it was the whole of the main straight. It's still difficult to overtake cars on a similar performance. So you need to be within something of the order of 3/10 of someone in the last corner to be able to get alongside them by the end of the start-finish straight. In Malaysia, the straights are a little bit longer, and there's obviously a number of them. So again, I'm not sure yet. I think the FIA are still discussing whether we'll just have a single deployment or 2 deployments. So it's sort of in the hands of the FIA still of how they can still tweak and adjust the level of overtaking. But I think it helped people get through the back markers. It wasn't too easy. So it was there's still some racing out there. There were still people stuck. I mean, we had Mark Webber behind us at the end of the race, and again it wasn't enough for him to be able to overtake us, so which is good. KERS, I think again that is it's a very useful addition to your lap time performance. People are using it differently. Some people just use it in qualifying and it looks like the start. Other people are using it properly all the time. And I think that does again help your overtaking because you can use KERS to close the gap and then the DRS to close the gap. So the combination of the two, it becomes a bit of a game between the two cars. So you've got the car behind trying to use both to overtake, and you've got the car in front trying to use his KERS to pull a gap early on the straight. So it's interesting, but it's in a way it's good that it hasn't made overtaking too easy.
Tyres?
Tyres, I think Melbourne was obviously quite cold, and I think a lot of people were struggling with the tyres, ourselves included, in qualifying and getting the most out of particularly the hard tyre on one lap. I think it'll be very interesting with these tyres in Malaysia, where obviously rather than a 20-degree ambient and a 25-degree track, it's going to be a 35 ambient and up to a 50-degree track. So I think that will be another interesting sort of thing for us to get to grips with. Pirelli have been saying that as the circuit gets hotter, the tyres are going to get closer together. We haven't had any experience running in that hotter conditions. So again, that's part of the Friday programme, is to try and understand how the two tyres work on short and long runs.
If you were a spectator, do you think there was an improvement of the show compared to last year?
I suppose as overtaking is slightly easier, or appeared that way in Melbourne, it can only help the show because the tyres make it slightly more challenging, where they're obviously, or challenging, more exciting, I suppose. You don't. Melbourne last year, if it had been dry, you would have stopped on lap 5 and just run one set to the end. So the race is all out the way quite early on. At least now, with the tyres lasting 20 laps, it forces people to do a minimum of 2 stops. You know, there was a mixture of 2 and 3 stops. There was only one person that attempted a 1 stop in Melbourne, and obviously pace was quite slow to try and actually achieve that to start with. So you know, it's a good mix, but I think you know tyre-wise it will change again with the temperature. So again, will it be that situation in Malaysia? It's hard to say at the moment.
What can be done between 2 races like Australia and Malaysia to improve our performance?
Well, it's these years it's a constant development. So I say we've been analysing our sort of qualifying and race performance. There's a few little things we want to try and change and improve, which we're adding into an already busy test programme. So there's quite a few aerodynamic updates that we have got coming through for Malaysia, and to that we've added 3 or 4 additional aero test items just to try and understand the car better. I would think we'll also have some parts to test between Malaysia and China. So it's just these years it's a constant development all the way through the year.
Talk about the Sepang circuit. What are the main characteristics? What does a car need to be a winning car there?
Well, I suppose the first and obvious thing is being in the temperatures that you're running in there. You need a car with sensible cooling levels. Sometimes you have a car where you open up the cooling and you lose a huge amount of downforce, and that's been quite evident in the past. And you see people's performance from very hot circuits to very cold circuits vary quite a lot because of the cooling effects. So you need a car that cools well. You need a car with a reasonable amount of downforce. Particularly there's that high-speed combination of corners just at the start of sector 2, which is quite challenging. It's a good all-round sort of combination circuit. And I suppose the other thing you're always looking at in Sepang is when do the showers turn up in the afternoon, just to make either qualifying or the race more exciting.
Do you think on the engine side this can be a decisive factor more than in Melbourne?
Well, I think in Melbourne the engines are, well, the cooler conditions obviously give the engines an easier time. It should all be quite easy for people just to control, cooling levels to make sure. I must admit, I can't remember the exact power effect differences between the two tracks.
Aspettiamo voi che video was exactly like the one I tried last time.